Amanda Dougherty was a 5-year-old little girl who loved jewelry and Barney, the purple dinosaur.
But on September 22nd of 1994, her parents woke up, went into her room, and noticed that the bottom bunk was empty. It was the bunk that she normally slept on. Mandy was gone. Their 2 pit bulls were running freely in their front yard, and their front door was wide open. A massive search began for Mandy, but no one knew where she was. This is Twisted Crimes. Back in September of 1994, Amanda, who liked to be called Mandy, lived in this house with her dad David, mom Laurie, and 9-year-old brother Jason, along with their 2 pit bulls, who were very protective of the home here on Southwest 63rd Terrace in North Lauderdale, Florida. Laurie was a waitress at Cheater's Bar, while David ran heavy construction equipment. The family had recently begun remodeling their home. They were ripping up the carpet and replacing it with tile. David had been in trouble with the law throughout his life. When he was just 16 years old, he ran over his best friend with his motorcycle and killed him. He was convicted of manslaughter, but he was only given 2 years probation after his best friend's mom testified that she felt it was an accident. According to a Florida Health and Rehabilitative Services document released to the Palm Beach Post in 1995, there had been allegations of abuse in the home. Police records show that during Mandy's short life, the police had been at the house more than 24 times, an average of about once every 2 months. Some of those calls involved a complaint from David's mom, Regina Dougherty, where she had accused him of abusing her mom, his grandmother, Helen Caparelli. On December 5th of 1992, Helen went to the hospital with severe head injuries and underwent emergency brain surgery. 10 days later, she died. David was charged with abuse, and he eventually pled no contest to the charges. He was placed on probation for 5 years. Some of the other police visits were because of calls from concerned neighbors, allegations of abuse, and fights between David and Laurie. A police report from December of 1991 said David, quote, needs to be locked up or he will kill his wife, end quote. In April of 1992, David told police 3 boys from the neighborhood had abused Mandy inside his home. 2 of the boys were arrested. Then, just 2 nights before Mandy went missing, on September 20th of 1994, a neighbor heard children screaming in the home. A family member said the reason for all the screaming that night was that a man had shown up at the house wanting to visit with Laurie, and David was furious about it. The family member said the man had probably met Laurie while she was working as a dancer for 2 years at a strip club called The Body Shop. Florida Health and Rehabilitative Services had requested that Amanda and Jason sleep in separate rooms. Their parents agreed to the suggestion. The report also stated there were other issues in the home. David was sent to jail earlier that year for a parole violation, and while he was away, Laurie worked as a topless dancer. During that time, she was bringing random men to the house for private entertainment. The report goes on to say, quote, following David's release from prison, problems escalated. David is believed to resent Laurie's love and adoration for Amanda. There are no immediate concerns with regard to Jason, as he was not the star child, end quote. However, despite the agreement to have the kids sleep in different rooms, on the night of September 22nd, Jason and Mandy headed off to the same room, where Mandy settled into the bottom bunk while Jason climbed up to the top one. According to David, just after midnight, he went in to check on his kids. He said they were both asleep. Mandy's brown eyes were concealed beneath her closed eyelids. Her 3'6", 40-pound body was resting peacefully in her bed. She had on a blue shirt. On the shirt was a large pink heart, surrounded by smaller, multicolored hearts. David would later say he and Laurie headed to bed around midnight. Also around midnight, a woman by the name of Eula Royster was out jogging. Somewhere in this area here, not far from the Dougherty home, there was a bench at the time. She would later tell police she saw a little girl sitting on the bench crying, but for some reason, she did not stop to check on her. At 3 a.m., a neighbor said he noticed the front door of the Dougherty home was wide open. He also said the family's pit bulls were wandering around the front yard. Around 6:30 that morning, David and Laurie got up for the day and went to wake up the children, but Amanda was not in her bed. They noticed the front door was wide open, and they began searching for Amanda. About an hour later, Laurie called 911. During the call, she said,
"She's 5 years old. My front door is wide open. My husband is here too, and we can't find her anywhere. I woke up about an hour ago, and she was gone. I don't know. Maybe she walked out while sleeping. I don't know." Police showed up quickly and set up a command post in the street in front of the house. They were monitoring the house 24 hours a day. They even brought in the FBI. Police began a massive search effort using foot patrol, dive teams, and helicopters. Hundreds of friends, neighbors, and family members were also searching for Mandy. Police talked to other people who had been near the area where the bench was around the time the jogger said she had seen the little girl, but no one else had seen the little girl. The police department had so many people working on the case that they released a statement asking for no one to call the police department unless they had an actual emergency for the time being. We're now on 95th Avenue South, off of Glades Road in Boca Raton, Florida.
Now this whole area over here, you see all kinds of buildings, shops, businesses, parking lots and whatnot. None of that was here back in September of 1994. At that time, that was just a wide open field. And this road right here was just a small dirt road. Behind us, you'll see this large wall right here. That wasn't here either. On September 24th of 1994, a jogger was running through here, ran past a canal, and saw the body of Mandy there. She was in a fetal position and was in 6 inches of water. Police had a little difficulty identifying who she was at first, although they had a pretty good idea, of course, that this probably was her. But they brought the father in. He couldn't identify her. She was bloated and deformed from being in this water in the hot Florida sun for such a long period of time. Police eventually confirmed the body was that of 5-year-old Amanda. She was found with no clothes on. She had strands of blue and white electrical tape around her neck. She was face down in the water, and she had been strangled. According to a study released by Safe at Last, less than 1% of all missing children cases involve an abduction by a stranger. 71% of cases when a stranger does abduct a child happen when the child is on the way to or from school. More than 90% of child abductions are done by a parent. That means it is a tiny number of cases that happen at a home, at night, while the entire family is asleep with 2 pit bulls guarding the house. Perhaps it's never happened. However, as you'll see in just a bit, this case is not as open and shut as you might be thinking. Police, of course, wanted to interview the parents. David sat down with police and agreed to take a couple of lie detector tests, which he failed. Then he agreed to take a stress test, which he said he also failed. After that, he took a second stress test, which he also failed. Laurie sat down for lie detector test on several occasions, but each time she ended up ripping off the wires and walking away, never once completing a test. David and Laurie did mention to the police on several occasions that they knew who had killed their daughter. In the early 1990s, an old friend of David's, a man by the name of Stephen Covell, had showed up at their house. He told them that he was down on his luck and they agreed to let him stay with them. He ended up staying with them for about 1.5 years. During that time, he would babysit the kids, and he often took Mandy to a children's group at church. David and Laurie told police that they found a cracked pipe hidden amongst Stephen's things. Apparently that wasn't enough for them to throw him out of their house, though. It was only when Laurie's tips from work and jewelry began to disappear that they decided to kick him out. They said Stephen knew the dogs well and would have no trouble getting around them to grab Mandy. Laurie also told police that Stephen had put on a lot of weight since Mandy's murder. She said he was now over 300 pounds. He had also been convicted of cocaine possession in 1995. Police did not have enough evidence to arrest anyone in the case and quickly hit a dead end. A year after the murder, police began running new tests on items found at the crime scene, at the Dougherty home, and in their vehicles. They attempted to question the parents many more times, but
They were never able to get very far before one or both of the parents began crying or shouting in anger before storming out of the interview room. Several years went by with no one charged for the crime. Then in 2000, there was a string of at least 6 bank robberies in Florida. On November 28th of 2000, a 10-year-old girl was walking to Crest Haven Elementary School in Pompano Beach, Florida. She was walking with her 6-year-old sister on this road, which is Northeast 30th Street.
A man drove up to them. He was driving a 1999 red Dodge Caravan minivan. He reached out of his window. He grabbed the 10-year-old girl by her hair, yanked her off of her scooter, and pulled her into his van. He then took off down the road. The 6-year-old would later say she was crying and went back to her house. She told her brother, and he called the police.
Later during the trial, the 6-year-old was asked if she remembered a mailbox, to which she responded, "All I know is that she tried to hold on to it." The girl who was pulled through the driver's side window also testified at the trial. The girl would later testify in court. Once she was in the van, the man told her to, quote, "Stay down, I have a gun," end quote. Eventually, he stopped the van in an area of pine trees and made his way into the back seat, where he assaulted her.
After that was over with, he dropped her off in this area here, and she walked into this parking lot where she was able to find a lady who was sitting outside in her vehicle. She stopped and talked to her and asked her to give her a ride to school. She said she was worried about her little sister. The woman asked her what had happened, and she told her she had been assaulted. The woman took her then to a sexual assault treatment center where her entire body was swabbed for DNA evidence. Now, how this ties in to Mandy's story is that the man police eventually found not too far down the road for this crime was a man by the name of Stephen Covell. When they took a look at him, he had blue or some kind of ink dye on his arms, and he was a very large man, somewhere around 350 pounds. At the time, there was a bank robber running around known as the Big Boy Bandit. This bank robber was very large. He had robbed multiple banks in the area over the previous several weeks. Turns out Stephen Covell was the Big Boy Bandit. He also was later found guilty of assaulting this 10-year-old girl.
Once police realized the Big Boy Bandit who had abducted and assaulted this little girl was the same guy who lived with the Dougherty family, they moved him way up on the list of suspects. Police questioned him about the murder, but couldn't find any evidence linking him to Mandy's murder. They said he also fit the description a witness gave of a man who kidnapped and assaulted a 3-year-old in August of 2020 and dropped her off at a dump. David was in the courtroom for Stephen's trial for the attack on the 10-year-old girl. Stephen was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. The South Florida Sun Sentinel reported that David smiled when the guilty verdict was read.
Leonard Pitts Jr. is a former columnist for the Miami Herald. Here's a portion of a column he wrote in 1994 about this case. How do you kill a child? It is the question that won't let me be as I stand before the sidewalk shrine erected near the home of Amanda Dougherty, the 5-year-old North Lauderdale girl who was snatched from her bed and murdered recently. The sky is the color of charcoal, and a gentle rain is falling on the plastic-sheathed flowers, balloons, and signs left by strangers to honor the memory of a child whose death has cut too close to the bone. Candles in glass jars sit on the sidewalk, their flames extinguished, their wicks underwater. The only sound is the tapping of rain against a Barney balloon, a sound as soft as the ticking of a clock, as persistent as the passage of time. The purple dinosaur turns a smile to the unforgiving sky. This is a still, sad place. A place where it is all too easy to feel like the last person on earth. A place where the grim question is perhaps inevitable. How do you kill a child? How do you reach the decision that this is something you must do? What deal do you strike with your conscience? What compromise do you make with your humanity? How do you gather the rage? For some reason, I wasn't able to get distance on this one. You know how you tend to keep these things at arm's length? To convince yourself that it's not quite real because it happened to someone else, someplace else? It's what you've got to do just to make it through the day. And I would have done it with Amanda Dougherty, except, I don't know, I couldn't. Maybe it was the idea that she was taken from her bed, taken out of her sleep, with her family all around. Maybe it was the realization that if she wasn't safe there, then none of us is safe anywhere. How do you kill a child? How do you decide on the best means of murder? How do you choose whether to stab her in a chest barely wider than your palm or bash her ponytail with something heavy and hard? Do you shoot her between her wide, wondering eyes? Or do you strangle her the way someone did Amanda Dougherty? Officials say it may well turn out that Amanda was lured to her death by someone she knew and trusted. Maybe that will make us feel more secure. The knowledge that she was not the random victim of some faceless, sinister stranger, but was instead chosen by someone close to her who short-circuited and went berserk. If we could ascribe her murder to some freak close to her, far from our own lives, we could gain the needed distance and move on. But you have to question the value of distance, don't you? Maybe we're all just a little too distant these days, a little too numb. What does it say about us that we can read this news daily and forget about it by the time we reach the crossword puzzle? Yes, it's only prudent for your sanity to duck and cover from the mugging it gets every time you open a newspaper or turn on the TV. But if we have any outrage left in us, we should spend it right here on the murder of a child. Children are the best part of us. There is something powerfully true in the innocence of their self-absorption and the purity of their faith. There is something ennobling in their trust. How do you injure that? How do you kill a child? How do you prepare yourself to do such a deed? What psychic barriers must you break through? What do you say to police when they ask you why? What do you say to your mirror? What do you say to the child? How do you explain it to her as she writhes and screams beneath your hands and begs for mercy? And finally, breathes her last. And when it's over, when her body is cooling and still, what do you say to God? How do you kill a child? I'm not really sure. I want to know.
I'm not really sure I want to know either, but I would like to know who committed this horrific crime, and if that person is still alive, I'd like to see them suffer the consequences of it. To this day, no one has been charged in the murder of Amanda. Paul Miller, who was a spokesman for the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, said, talking about the big boy bandit, he was never eliminated as a suspect, but seemingly in a comment that at the time was aimed at David and Lori, he added, no one was ever eliminated. David passed away on August 20th, 2011. The big boy bandit, Stephen Cavell, continues to serve time in a Florida prison, where he will remain for the rest of his life.
We've now reached the opinion portion of our video where we discuss what we think may have happened in this case. We're going to start with Heather.
I really feel that it could have been the man that abducted that other girl or her father, since he failed 2 polygraph tests and a voice stress test.
Yeah, this is one of those that's a little bit tricky to figure out, which would explain why it's still unsolved after all these years. Stephen Cavell seems like an extremely good suspect here. Just the fact that he's capable of abducting a young girl like this, that he knew the family, he knew the pit bulls. The issue that I have with him is that if he hadn't been at the house for several months, which apparently was the case, then it seems that the pit bulls still would have reacted to him showing up at, say, 1, 2, 3 in the morning. At least initially, until they knew it was him, there would have been some kind of response from these animals. It seems so unlikely to me that anyone could have gotten past those pit bulls, even if they knew the pit bulls, unless it was someone that was actually inside of that house or unless someone was covering up for someone else.
Or perhaps maybe he was able to open the door and direct the dogs outside before he was able to get inside.
Well, that's definitely another possibility. Let's say he brought some kind of treat, food with him, was able to lure them outside. That's a possibility as well. It's tough because the father has a lot of issues too. He's been arrested multiple times, had been arrested multiple times. He beat up his own grandmother. He apparently also beat up his wife. He did a lot of really bad things, but none of that necessarily screams child killer. So it's really hard to pin it down. One of those two.
And her father, even at one point, strangled her mother. Like, you know, I just wanted to throw that in there too, because someone that's capable of doing that, knowing that potentially you could take someone out by doing that, it doesn't take long.
Yeah, that was his wife, I believe, that he was arrested for strangling her. And at the time, he also had a starter pistol and didn't want to be held in custody, didn't want to be taken into custody by the police. If you know anything about this case, anything at all, please contact the police department there. We'll put their information down below. Please join us next time. Thanks for watching.